Greetings, Rain Seekers, and welcome back to another round of Bendability with me, Emmet Lewis, the Splits Wizard. Today on Bendability, we are going to be discussing possibly something dragged up from the dungeons of stretching and stretch therapy, hated and reviled in some quarters, you congratulated and united. Does that even make sense in other quarters? You know, parades, all this stuff. We are talking about ballistic stretching. Yes, the one and only ballistic stretching. As some of you know, it's a good thing in my opinion. But we will discuss that in thing. But before we get to that, a bit of housekeeping. So, as some of you may have noticed, I am a bit delayed on the podcast from last week, so we skipped 2 weeks. And that was because one, this is my third round of recording this podcast due to some technical difficulties on recording, and yeah, that kind of slowed me down a little. But then afterwards, because we were so busy filming for Project X, I just didn't have time. I was working basically 16-hour days to film Project X. So we're now ready, as some of you have probably seen, we're ready to reveal Project X. And what is Project X? Project X is the launch of our new flexibility courses that we currently have a Kickstarter up running for. And we're actually day one into the Kickstarter. We were funded in 12 hours. And 24 hours in now when I'm recording this, we are 140% funded. So a massive thank you to everyone who has supported us on Kickstarter. If you haven't supported us on Kickstarter, I'd suggest jumping over there now, because we have a very generous discount going on, you know, if you buy one course, but if you buy sort of all the courses we're making in this round, then yeah, it's almost 40% off the list price to get them all of this. So it's a pretty good deal, because we know, you have to wait, and waiting is rewarded with discounts, as we like to do it. This will also, because we've already reached one of our stretch goals, it's going to enable us to actually record another course, of which we are planning a few secret courses. That basically secret because we haven't decided what we're going to do, but they're going to be touching on possibly even run a poll, but some very advanced flexibility concepts. So just a little bit of the overview of the courses we're making. So for this round of Kickstarter, we're doing 5 courses. Flexibility Foundations upper and lower, splits, middle splits, the other split basically, and bridge. And these courses are massive in scope, I have to say. I think the middle splits course is 40 videos long, and the other ones are kind of similar length, 30, 35 videos. Possibly even one of them is longer than that. I can't remember off the top of my head. So what these courses are is basically a transmission of the M3 system. The courses will have techniques and obviously guides similar to the handstand factory courses if you have them, but they're going to be different in format and different layout. We'll be talking about the techniques and theory, so there's going to be a lot of information on that, probably about an hour and a half of content in total. We'll see when it comes out when it's edited. As well as written content and other stuff. So this will be forming sort of the skeleton of the book I've been threatening to write for some time. That's one of the stretch goals on the Kickstarter as well. If we reach a certain point, I'll be able to shift my focus and lock myself in a room to write the book finally. That would be awesome if we reach that one as well. And everyone gets a discount on the book when we make it. So that'll be cool. Yeah. But this will form the skeleton of the book. So we will have comprehensive theory, reference, research, why we do things, the programming guides, why the techniques work, how they work, how you might implement them if you don't want to follow the programming. They'll have a comprehensive exercise library of quite in-depth, in detail videos explaining the techniques and the different things we're doing and the intents behind them. It will also have structured programming, so we're kind of have to see once I get all the videos back and actually write the programs. We're aiming for about a year's worth of programming for you to start your flexibility journey. And as we know, we always get disrupted during our journeys and training, or holidays, or kids, whatever happens. We have to take a break. So there's, possibly even 2 or 3 years worth of training progress on this. It's a year of consistent training minimum. And we'll also be explaining, all these kind of things of like, oh, if I come to this advanced, or I want to combine this with my strength training and my acrobatic training, how do I structure this in? So as far as I know, these are going to be some of the most, if not the most in-depth courses on flexibility ever created. I have to say that, but they're going to be awesome. I've really gone all out on this. It's taken me about 7 years of thinking about this to finally get to a point where I feel confident that I can deliver the courses in a structure that people will benefit, that is in line with my own values. Because at the end of the day, I make these courses, same with Handstand Factory, for myself. I basically go, what would I have liked in a course when I was looking for this, and can I make it? That's what I'm doing in this, and it's the exact same thing. So I'm basically aiming for that time travel will exist. This is my goal. We're gonna hope that Elon Musk invents time travel. We skip this Mars nonsense, we invent time travel. I'll make the courses and then I'll send them back to myself when I was 17. That's my goal. So hopefully you will get a lot of benefit out of it. And just, yeah, you know, a shout out to everyone who's already supported us, nice words, a comment, everything. It's always really, really appreciated. I really do. And, you know, if I don't get back to you, it's just because I'm busy, but I do read and do appreciate everything. So that's enough of me pitching our Kickstarter. Do get over there now. We are quite generous on the discounts though. And, you know, check it out. Thank you for the support in advance if you haven't already. So anyway, we are now going to talk about ballistic stretching. First, I suppose we have to define what is ballistic stretching, what is pulsing stretching. I prefer pulsing stretching actually, just because ballistic stretching has a very Nocebic effect where people have been told this is dangerous, it will make you explode, you will die, your penis will shrink, blah, all this stuff. And like every sort of exercise and every sort of thing, there is a risk to rewards benefit curve to these things. And I think once you understand the correct practice, the risks are very mitigated and the rewards are immense. And you know, from my own personal experience of teaching people this, it has given the fastest and most permanent changes I've ever seen out of any type of flexibility training as an average. But you have to pay the price to get in. So it's kind of the creme de la creme that we use it in a finishing off method a lot in the way in the system where it's like, okay, we've done this, now we're going to finish you off. So that's sort of, I'll talk a bit more about it in a second, but let's just get a definition of ballistic stretching. So ballistic stretching could be defined, and I actually went through every single research paper on this for this podcast that I could find, like literally every single research paper me and the team went through. So we have a good grasp on what's going on. So ballistic stretching can be defined as entering a stretched position and then going into a deeper position and coming out in a rhythmic fashion. This would be one way of defining it. And then we could also define a different type. So this would be what I would term as low amplitude, high frequency ballistic stretching. We could also have a different type of ballistic stretching, what I would actually term probably plyometric stretching, where we have a low frequency, high amplitude. And this would be, if we think about like stretch kicks or something like that, those who are familiar, and I have a program on that on my YouTube. This would be a different type. This would be plyometric stretching. And I think a lot of the may statements we hear about ballistic stretching, like it may cause the stretch reflex to be stronger, it may cause this, come from applying plyometric research and the idea of stretching muscle spindles fast cause a faster contraction out, to ballistic stretching, where in ballistic stretching or pulsing stretching, we're already in a stretched position and we're going deeper into this position. So we reviewed, as I said, we literally reviewed every single research paper to look at how they were doing the practice. A lot of them were very poor quality, I have to say, and that's not surprising with stretching research, but we got to work with what we got. So on average, we checked everyone that listed their practice, which not a lot did, surprisingly, where we basically went down and said, okay, what are they actually doing in the labs and what are they comparing? So they were using a frequency on average, or like everyone who lifted a frequency was using 1 stretch a second. The only people who weren't were doing basically 1 in, pause for a second, 1 out. So they're doing 30 BPM, but the actual stretch frequency was 1 hertz, if that makes sense. So we can see that, and I've seen some people banding around that 100 BPM is ballistic stretching. I don't agree with that, and neither does the research agree with that. So we can kind of try that out, and you can try it yourself, like bobbing at higher frequencies. At 100 BPM. I've tried this myself. I've tried even to hit 180 BPM to see what would happen. And, you know, it's just too fast to actually get any controlled movement in. Then in the papers, a lot of them were using a short amplitude in the stretching positions, where they were cueing people to enter and exit a stretch, trying to alter between 3 to 10 degrees was about the average range. We found 3 to 5 was actually more common, but 3 to 10. 3 to 10 degrees of motion into the stretch and then back out. So we could go ballistic stretching is pulsing at 60 BPM from an already stretched position and then entering into a deeper position and coming back out at a rate of one stretch per second. That gives us our working definition. That would agree with my kind of practice. What we do a bit differently, this is the kind of thing of like, okay, how can we add a bit more quality control and tasking, I suppose, into it? And we, in the modern methods of mobility, as a lot of you seen, introduced the idea of targeting and tasking and contacting. And what we do for this is basically we'll have either a hand, something you're reaching, a contact or a target point, which will stop you going too far into the stretch, and at the same time we stop you going too far out. So this gives us a nice kind of bobbing range that we can work with. And it's kind of interesting if we think of the graphs, what these positions would make. If we think of say a stretch kick or a plyometric stretch, where we have this very high, low duration in a stretch, very fast out, and very fast restoring to our normal standing posture or close to it, then we would have this kind of graph that goes rapidly up and rapidly down. Whereas in a ballistic stretch, the way we have described it, what we have in the graphs is we have a stretch, what goes up, and then a kind of Bart Simpson's, if you imagine, it makes a Bart Simpson on the graph, or crabs across if you're familiar with crypto. And it makes this kind of Bart Simpson idea. And what this does is it basically, one of the things I think of that ballistic stretch and why it works is it gives us a chance to experience a very high intensity stretch for a very short duration. One that would be too intense to hold for a longer duration. So our duration in reserve is possibly sub 10 seconds or sub 3 seconds. But because we get a lot of time in this position, we then build up our stretch tolerance is one way of thinking of it. So we're able to tolerate because we're beginning to digest and assimilate the sensations we achieve in these deeper elongated positions. And we get this iteration of constant exposure. And the exposure, once you kind of we can think of hitting a reflex. If we hit your knee jerk reflex with one of those hammers, maybe you're familiar, your doctor's done it to it or physio's done it to you, the tendon stretch reflex or whatever it's called, then this basically, once you've done it about 10 times, it stops happening. So this kind of reaction to the stretching, if we keep up this kind of frequency, dies down and allows us to enter deeper positions. And we see this over the course of a set when we're using our targeting, where we basically would we'll have a target and we would stretch our intent to try to touch the target, and we mightn't touch the target, but it's achievable, set up in the bounds that we like to set up our tasking. And then we achieve a light contact, and then a few reps later we'll achieve a firm contact, and then we'll achieve a strong contact where it feels like we're pushing into the support. And that would be the time when we'd iterate into a deeper position, either moving 1 or 2 centimeters deeper. So this means we can control the ranges within these kind of bounds of 3 to 5 degrees or 3 to 10 degrees of motion. So I find that kind of quite interesting that we can set these up in a way that we're not just throwing ourselves into the stretch and hoping it happens. We're kind of we're in a controlled position, we're operating from this controlled position, and as we iterate and get better at this position, then we can change the task slightly to deepen it and still keep the bound very safe. So that's kind of one of the ways I would define ballistic stretching and ballistic stretching practice. Now, the history of ballistic stretching is quite interesting because it's one of these things it's kind of I was interested in it. I was I suppose I'll do my personal history first. So my personal history in ballistic stretching was if you've seen the Kung Fu Twins side split routine. So I was taught that. I think it was either, I'm trying to remember dates here, but it was sometime around September, November in Ireland when I'd just gone to the first circus school in Circuit Media. I met these twins and they had amazing leg flexibility. And I think I said in the video that they didn't have pike or something like that. And I think, I was corrected on that, but one of the twins got in touch, was no, you're wrong. I stand fully corrected on that and rescind my comments. But I think in general, I was just blown away by their splits. Still to this day, they're still some of the best splits on men I've ever seen. Barring people who are just have hypermobility type syndromes and other stuff. And even then they're up there with the best. And these guys did not appear to be hypermobile in terms of, maybe they were, I obviously didn't inspect them on this, but I was blown away with their side splits. And I asked them, what do you do? and they showed me the routine they'd done, and it was ballistic stretching. So it's pull to pull to pull, and you can see the video on my YouTube. I tried it out, and it was really good. It was working for me. I was like, holy shit, this is working, this is amazing. Then I went to circus school, or one of the coaches in circus school was like, no, you can't do this, you're gonna tear your shit and blah. So I stopped doing it, contrary to what was working for me, and basically stuck with the circus school stretching at the time, which done something but wasn't great. So I kind of put it away, and then I kind of forgot about it and didn't think it was a thing, just other than seeing it like when I was researching stretching and finding things like ballistic stretching is dangerous, don't do it, blah. So then I was like, okay, fine, I just won't do it, and forgot about it. And just would have been one of these people who would have been saying, oh, don't do bounce in your stretches, it's dangerous, don't bounce, it's dangerous, blah. Then I remember I came across Pavel Tsatsoulinev, and of kettlebell fame, Comrade Pavel, and I kind of found one of his books in a library. I think it was Relaxing to Stretch. Relaxing to Stretch. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Didn't know much about Thomas Kerr's of this. It was back probably 2004, something like that. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll try this out. It was worth. So then I went to the library near me, and they had some VHSs you could order in of Pavel. So I ordered the VHS in of Pavel, and it was a precursor to his Relaxing to Stretch work. It was like very, very VHS, if you know what I mean, in terms of these training videos we can have at that time. And Pavel in the video was doing a lot of ballistic middle splits, and I was like, holy shit, this man is doing it. And it's kind of funny because it was a video, I don't know, I'd love to track it down again. If anyone knows what video it is, or has a copy of it, or you know, if it's on YouTube or anything, if they could send me a link, would be awesome. I'd really appreciate that. If you don't, or if you have a copy, you know, whatever. But if someone knows how to track it down, or even the name of it, would be amazing. I'd love to get it back. But it was before the days when Pavel had really gone like, I am Spetsnaz, Special Forces. You know, he hadn't adopted the character Pavel that he became famous for at the start of his career. So it was just a very matter-of-fact presentation, doing ballistic middle splits using a wall. And I was like, oh my God, he's doing ballistic middle splits. But then in his book, he says, do loaded stuff. So, you know, once again, ignored it. And then, I don't know, probably about 8 years later, I came across a guy called Jerry Hatter and Industrial Strength Flexibility. And that's an awesome book as well, or not book, video. Was it DVD? Video, DVD. So he's kind of pretty awesome. I think it doesn't exist anymore, but it had the same pulsing routine the twins had actually in it, but they were there first. So I was like, okay, this guy's super bendy. He says it's safe. I've seen the other ones. Gave it a go. It worked. It was pretty good, but I got distracted by other stuff. So that kind of goes that. Then I found the stretch therapy forums. I found Craig Mallet, and Craig was coming from a traditional Chinese martial arts background, and he was doing a lot of ballistic stretching in his practice. And I was like, hold on, isn't this dangerous? And he was like, I don't know, I've been doing this for 10, 12 years. I never thought it was dangerous. We teach it to everyone in our classes and where I teach. And I was like, okay. And so I tried it out with Craig's guidance. So thank you, Craig. Check out Craig Mallet as well. He's awesome. And he basically was, no, it's safe, blah, blah, blah. So I started trying it, and I started getting results. I was like, okay, that's cool. Then about this time, I was kind of researching more traditional Chinese martial arts and also wushu on the back of this. And I found when I was visiting some clubs, just, you know, trying out some evening classes or seeing what was going on, there was a very distinct grouping that you would find. The ones who had the Chinese coaches would do pulsing and ballistic stretching. And they were generally the more flexible ones compared to the other groups that had Westerners as main coaches and weren't as flexible. I was like, okay, something's going on here. Like clearly this works. Like that's the thing, clearly it works, and clearly these people are very fucking flexible. So I was like, okay, let's get into this. So I put some serious work into it and started working, got the head to toe stretch as the 100-day head to toe stretch. And I'll tell that story in a second. So then I got the head zone, and I was like, okay, it worked, it's safe, it didn't injure me. I've gotten massively more flexible. At that stage, I had head to toe basically completely cold, and I could hold the position, not just like bounce up and down and tap, tap, tap. It was like, okay, I could just hold this position, you know, and despite what people say is like, oh, you only get it in a tapping manner. You don't, you get to hold it. So then I went on a kind of like, okay, let's make every stretch a ballistic stretch and just kind of came up with this kind of workshop manner of like, can I turn positions, or can I find effective stretches for every kind of body part and use the ballistic stretching training? And I did. So then I came up with a whole syllabus based on this pulsing type stretching. Then it kind of, at this time I was also posting a lot of kind of what I was discovering on Kit Loughlin's forum and Kit and Frederick Beck, where Fred was living in Australia and living near Kit, and they also started exploring and found some amazing results from it as well. So we're all kind of doing this, and we all kind of came up with this idea of tasking and targeting, or finding some targets exceeding different positions, different things, as we were kind of want to do. And, you know, as we share alike and discuss things we're finding on the forum or used to in the day, and obviously talk with Kit still now. So then I was like, okay, it's working. It's clearly worked for all of us. Can we go? So then I implemented it with more students getting the results. It was all within safety parameters, getting awesome results as well. Not that like the results I was getting at the time were bad with the other stuff, but this was just a bit better. So then it was like, okay, it clearly works. This is my own kind of like, you know, and it's not, this is the kind of thing when you read the research on the ballistic stretching, it always comes back as like, it's not right, or it's not as good as what they're comparing it to. Whereas my experience was it was better or equal to. Now obviously there's a bit of variance from person to person who responds to this, but if we're looking at like, you know, groups of 20 or 30 people I'd be trying this out at. And then it was like, okay, well, why? And if we looked at the papers, when I've gone through the papers again, I went through them, you know, 10 years ago when I was looking this up, and then I went through them again recently. If we look at what they're doing, a lot of the positions, the stretches they're doing, the ones that included photos, were not in line with basically our effective vectors theory or planes of gravity theory, where they were going immediately from a they're basically, most stretches are set up in a gravity neutral plane or not using a targeting. So I think basically transitioning through our planes and our effective vectors or planes of gravity for the ballistic stretching is one of the most effective things you can do, as well as combining the targeting. So targeting, even if it means you're not going deeper, it keeps the reps consistent. And this is an incredibly important thing, because when you look at people who are doing a ballistic stretch, when they're not having this kind of setup where they cannot be consistent, the reps will not be the same. They'll vary in depth and intensity. So by having this target, we always make sure our reps are of equal or exceeding intensity. So that's what we're looking for. So generally, it's one of these things when I start looking at gyms and I start seeing, you know, it's one of my hobbies to watch people at gyms. You know, I'm the creep in the corner watching people. Not really. I dominate the gym. I stand on the floor and put a plyo box, and I stand on top and watch everyone like blatantly. But I love watching January noobs and February noobs. People are completely new to the gym, and watch what they do. And it is kind of interesting, because if you look at these people who are probably not that flexible, and they don't know gym practice, they haven't been in a gym long enough to know what the environment says is permissible to do, and they start stretching. And when they do the stretching, you see that they actually tend to kind of bounce and bob into the positions. And it's kind of interesting. It's like, it kind of goes, you know, they mightn't be that flexible or even flexible at all or have a good range of motion, but they're doing this. And it kind of makes me think that like this kind of pulsing stretching gives us a way to, like, they'd be backing out, I suppose, because of the stretch tolerance and the pain or the sensation is uncomfortable. But they're still going in and out, and that's like limbering them up, freeing up their range of motion. It's quite a natural thing for people to do. So it's kind of interesting that it's kind of, once you get told you're not meant to do this, then everyone stops doing it. So it is kind of that. I do find this kind of language around ballistic stretching to be incredibly nocebic. And you see this from a lot of authorities that like say things like, it's that may. Ballistic stretching may do that, may do this. Whenever I hear a may statement, it's what I call a weasel word. It means nothing. It's a rhetoric device that can basically cause, you know, confusion or cause a false kind of impression. Like, ballistic stretching may cause injuries. All stretching may cause injuries if done wrongly. Squatting may damage your knees. And badly done squatting with bad technique, or not setting up or not loading correctly, or not dealing with all the requirements you need for good form squatting, may injure your knees. This kind of thing, it needs a thing where we see it like ballistic stretching may cause injuries, it may cause a stronger stretch reflex, it may cause this. You know, ballistic stretching may heal your previous injuries. It actually did for me. As some of you know, I tore my side splits quite badly, and I was doing ballistic middle splits, and it basically fixed my right leg. My right leg was the worst leg. It had the biggest tear, biggest scar, biggest massive scar tissue, and I'd torn it multiple times on the advice of physios to get a thing. Ballistic stretching fixed it. I have like normal full range of motion back in my right leg. It's back to being my looser leg. That happened because of ballistic stretching. So I could say ballistic stretching may heal your injuries. Ballistic stretching may add zeros to your bank statement. You see what I'm getting at, where it's just we haven't got the volume of research needed done in strict controlled conditions with people who understand the practice and have implemented correctly with their students, gotten results, and then know how to get results using one type of stretching and then can compare it with another type. Whereas what we get is kind of research papers with people who haven't, let's face it, most people in most universities don't have a huge amount of practical training compared to someone in the practice. I'm not saying I'm better, but I'm just saying that there needs to be a bit of more linkage between the practitioners who are applying this and the people who aren't. So there is that kind of thing. I find that language becomes Nocebic, because if you go in and go, squat, like it's classic, squatting may make you slower. Okay, oh shit, squatting is going to make me slower. I better not squat because that's going to make me slower. Whereas we know squatting done correctly in the right speed strength zones may make you quicker. Squatting done in the wrong speed strength zones or the wrong rate of range or displacement in your movement may make you slower. Okay, we know this. So we know we have more accurate things that we can say with may statements, whereas the general may statements, they become Nocebic and they begin to disillusion and jade the practitioners before they've actually attempted the practice. So we have to watch out for this Nocebic language, and we have to, as practitioners, make sure we are not inadvertently doing it because of our own biases against a certain type of stretching. It could be simple, like relaxed stretching may make you weak. Maybe. May make you weak for an acute phase that passes and may make you stronger in the long run. See, it's this kind of may statement. So we have to watch out for these kind of may statements. It's not without saying these things are riskless or will work for you, but at the same time, we need to watch out for weasel words and weasel statements. So it's this kind of idea that we have now going in, that we have this idea of a definition, we have a kind of personal history, we have an idea that naturalness will play into this. We have an idea of not going in with Nocebic ideas and to try a practice with an open kind of engagement with the correct practice. So I kind of think that is important. I just think it's really important. And I kind of would like to divulge into some of the research I found in Chinese martial arts. So I was getting like Chinese martial translations. There's a great site for that, Brennan Translations, and you can track down ones in Chinese and other stuff. And I found this really cool book, Liang Gong Miju. So it's one we can find. I'll probably put a link to it somewhere at some stage, or put it on my Instagram a few times at this stage. It's kind of interesting. It had this move that I found out through speaking to other coaches and historians of Chinese martial. It was actually super, super common. And there's two variations of it. And the Chen Tian Gong. So basically upholding the heaven skill was one that they would train where it'd be doing a standing split head to toe with a teacup balanced on your foot and holding this for long times. The goal was initially to be able to do it holding with the hands, and then once you actually achieved the skill of, I think they're probably holding for about 10 minutes, then the way of doing it would be to do it without the hands, with your toe touching your head. So there's some serious static active flexibility development that I have not seen in real life, but I've seen in multiple places that it is a skill to be attained, and that is when you would have Gong in the skill. So that's kind of interesting, that it kind of has this long history, this standing head to toe position and the head to toe itself. And when you look at these manuals, I'd find, and this kind of informed my own practice on ballistic stretching, the numbers I use, that all these manuals would generally have the numbers 18, 36, 72 or 108. Now, for those of you who understand Buddhism or Taoism, these numbers have special significance in these systems that relate to kind of things. But generally, like, these numbers are pretty good baseline to be able to repeat a skill on, generally anyway. So it's kind of, if you look at what's going on, that if we are holding, say, a stretch for 90 seconds, so we're holding a stretch for 90 seconds, but we're pulsing in at 72 times, then if our pulse rate is actually a small bit slower than 1 a second, that actually gives us about 90 seconds, or counts the whole time. So then we go, like, if our pulses are like 1.2 or 1.3 hertz, then we actually get 90 seconds. 90 seconds is a pretty good baseline for holding a stretch. So it's kind of interesting in that way. So that kind of informed my own positioning on where I would use the numbers 36, 72, and 108 to count repetitions in sets. Now you could do this in zones of 30 to 40, 70 to 90, 100 to 120. You could do it like that. But generally I found the 72 rep range to be the most effective. I tried this out with like 200, going up to 200 pulses a set. I think of anyone who's seen the elusive 45-day wushu protocol from whoever it was, that they'd be doing basically 800 bounces, 400, so they'd be doing one direction hamstring, second direction hamstring, they do 400 pulses in each one. That's a lot of volume. So what I always found is like about half that rate gets it. And if someone is doing loaded mobility stuff on top of the programming, they can actually get away with less and do only 36 and still get results. So it's quite effective in that terms that we could do this as a specialization program. So this comes down to correct practice. Do I go all in? So I always think of ballistic stretching, how I implement it personally, as a specialization routine that we're going to pick one muscle group only, or maybe two if it's on the other side. So we could do hip flexors and hamstrings as an example. And we're just going to specialize on that. We're going to drop our expectations for our training because we're going to be doing it every day, or 6 days a week, 5 days a week. And then we'll, expect that it will be sore. It will make you sore and everyone gets sore from it, and that's fine. But then afterwards, when we come back, we'll go into maintenance routine where we'll just do one set of pulses and just maintain for another 4 weeks, and then we basically have it. So that is one way of looking at it. Then you could repeat this cycle a bit until you get it, or until you get your desired depth in the position you're looking at, whatever it is, head to toe. I'm kind of speaking about head to toe here, but it could be front splits, it could be middle splits, it could be pancake, something like this. So to set up in the correct practice of a ballistic stretch, we have to have a position we can work from. So generally we want a position that has a duration in reserve of about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. So we want to set up deep in a position, but at the point that we can hold it and it's not too intense. So it's a comfortable stretch, but it is still a stretch. It's not like a position like I'm sitting bolt upright in a pancake. I could hold this all day. I could just sit in a pancake until my legs go numb. Not useful. We need to be like leaning forward or leaning over one of the legs to the point where like, okay, I could hold this for about 90 seconds. That's a good benchmark. Then we will start implementing our pulsing. So if we're doing our pulses, then we'll be going in, finding our target, aiming to touch the target, touch that floor, make contact with the block, touch a body part to another body part, make a contact point between something that's getting squeezed together. Cool. Once we have made our target, then we will try and exceed the target. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at this iteration, signal, digestion, output, iteration idea that we're contact, made strong contact. Strong contact means pushing through the target or pushing the target away. Keep the reps consistent. When the flexibility outputs, it could be every 2 repetitions, it could be every 10 repetitions. It could be set 1 improves and set 2 and 3 stay at the same target level. These kind of things you'll have to find out for yourself in experimentation. And it could also depend on the intensity of sensations. Like I could go deeper, but this is quite intense for me. So I'm just going to stay at the same level and work on building that up until it is better. So this is the idea on the targeting. Now we also have to have, depending on the position, if it's more suspended, say we're doing a ballistic front split and we're doing that from an isometric front split. Once again, we can hold our isometric front split for 90 seconds. So, bear that in mind, or long lunge. But if we had something to control the depth of our bouncing, so we could have once again, our foam bricks, we'd have a stack of them or some weight plates. And then as we're going deeper, it's still limiting that range of motion. So we're bobbing up and down 2 or 3 centimeters at max. And then we can, every time we need to, just adjust that target a little bit. And that means we're not like dropping our weight down to the maximum extensibility we have or beyond that, and then hoping we come back out. We also have this idea in ballistic stretching that we basically, I always think of it like bend the bow, shoot the arrow. So the act of pulling me in is going to do this. So we want to use the muscles on the closing or shortening side of the joint to pull us in. They pull us in. We're not using too much hand assistance or using a partner or something forcing us in. We're using kind of like, we have, say we're doing the head to toe. Hip flexors are pulling in, abs are involved, hands are giving assistance, not hands are yanking me in and then I'm falling out. So we always want to be under this idea of like building the resource of pulling ourselves deeper into the position. And that will in turn give us a bit more leeway on control of the depth, because we can only really get in as deep as our closing side or shortening side of the joint can pull us in. So we have this idea, and we also have probably reciprocal inhibition working there in our favor as well. But this pulls us in, and then we release that contraction, or we release what's going out, and the stretch pulls us back to our high duration in reserve starting position. So you can see we're just bobbing in and we're getting our Bart Simpson effect on our graph. Then we also have the idea in correct ballistic, maybe not correct ballistic stretching, because that would be an isolated ballistic stretch, but in the correct idea of the modern methods of mobility, we want to layer in a resource. And what we mean by a resource is we want to educate the body on what it is going to do. So for this, we could be like, we could perform an isometric in the shortening side of the joint to facilitate the ability of that joint in that position to contract harder, or the muscle groups to contract harder, to pull us deeper, so it has more facilitation, more available strength, and that in turn gives us more. So we could think about, if we're doing this, we're going to do head to toe, and you can see the SLP Protocol is a classic example of this, where we'll perform shortening side contractions on an overcoming isometric to facilitate the joint. So we're doing something crushing a block, we take the block out, and then we will do our pulses using this idea of pulsing in with our newly facilitated muscles again, hopefully pull us a bit deeper. And this layering idea is fantastic and works in all the kind of movements we do. We could do it in pancake as an example, another example. So the pancake position, we could do pancake compression isometrics, pancake compression lifts. So you do an isometric, so you do your, say, single leg pancake compression, turn towards the leg, place a weight plate or partner holds that position, lean forward, try to perform compression isometric, 2 to 3 rounds of 10 seconds, remove the weight, immediately perform your competic lifts or static active hold. Then take a small break, 30 to 45 seconds, to go back in and perform your pulses. This will turbocharge the effect of the ballistic stretching. It will make it much easier, and we're also building that shortening strength at the same time. So we have these kind of ideas already going in that we can make things more effective. We could also, when we're setting up in our high duration and reserve position, we could perform some contract relax type stretches where we set up, and we could layer this all into one omega set, which is the SLP Protocol, where we do shorten, lengthen, pulse. And how we do this will be, we'll set up in a position, I've demonstrated it in the front split deep dive in that position, where we'll perform an isometric for the shortening side, going deeper, facilitating the range. We will then assess where we were feeling it, perform some lengthening side contractions, release some of the residual tension or resistance to stretch tension we were feeling, and then on top of that, we would layer in the pulsing. So we have a triple layer going on, which makes this very, very effective. In fact, we only really use 20 pulses in this situation when we're coming into it, because 18 pulses technically if we're using our Chinese numbers. Because it is damn effective, and it can just exceed kind of the zones, and basically it's so effective that we don't want to do too much work there, because we can get away with doing very little. And that's the goal of training, is to do incredibly little training to get the results. Our goal of training is always basically run sub 9 seconds in the 100 meters by squatting 1 day a year and only doing 1 single repetition. That's our goal of training to get the results, and then as close as we can get to that, the better it will be for the rest of our performing our activity. Because remember, stretching and flexibility and strength training, well, it can be the main course for a lot of people who are out there. It is a supplementary activity designed to enhance other things. Just bear that in mind when we're doing it. So that's kind of a brief presentation on ballistic stretching or pulsing type stretching. We're going to revisit this topic, and I want to dissect some of the papers in much more depth. So we're going to do that a bit later in the season. Other than that, if you haven't already, just pause this podcast and immediately go onto my Kickstarter, check it out. If you're listening to this in the future, you missed the Kickstarter, but we have courses available now. Other than that, you know where to find me. Send me your messages, send me your reviews. Don't forget, give me reviews. I love reading my reviews. I love your comments and other stuff. If stuff you've tried from the podcast is working out for you and you've got some before and afters, please send them to me. I'd love to see it. If something's not working, just send me a video and I'll see what I can see if I can help you out. Other than that, I have been the Splits Wizard. You have been great, and this has been another round of Bendability.